Basketball, and sports in general, give athletes a platform to have adoration of millions. However, with huge popularity, there's also a large number of haters. It just comes with the territory. There are various reasons why some players are hated more than others, whether it's their tenacity, big mouth, basketball rivalry, or moving to a different team. Here are the 10 most hated NBA players of all time. LeBron James. It doesn't matter that LeBron James is one of the best athletes who ever walked this planet in general. It doesn't matter that he is an avid fighter for human rights and that he has donated millions to those in need. LeBron is one of the most hated NBA players ever, even today after his 3 rings and a Mount Rushmore career. His biggest flaw was that he estimated that his Cleveland Cavaliers were not constructed to win an NBA championship and decided to switch teams and take his talents to South Beach. No free agency decision in sports history rocked the world like that press conference with LeBron James, who immediately went from NBA's sweetheart to its #1 villain. He didn't help himself with that not 1, not 2, not 3 homecoming in Miami, which I'm sure he'd like to take back if he could. His first game back in Cleveland can be pictured in the dictionary next to the term hostile environment. After he lost to the Mavs in the finals, many people celebrated and called him all kinds of names and insults. There are many people who have built their careers by hating on LeBron, and that's okay. More power to him. One of the best James characteristics is that he doesn't acknowledge haters and always holds a high ground. LeBron lived through enormous expectations ever since he was young, and he exceeded them, both on and off the court. It's fascinating that the worst thing you can say about the man who lived in the spotlight since he was 16 years old is that he had one questionable press conference and that he played one bad playoff series in 2011. Kevin Durant. 6 years after LeBron's decision on ESPN, Kevin Durant's next chapter on Players Tribune yielded a similar backlash. Durant's free agency was one of the most expected in recent NBA history, given the fact he is a generational player whose presence on the court instantly makes almost any team a contender. After he bolted from Oklahoma City for Golden State, a team that has defeated him in the playoffs and who had won 73 games without him, Durant caused maybe the biggest jersey bonfire in the history of sports. He was called soft, a snake, a cupcake, and those were some of the less derogatory names. But it was not just fans who felt betrayed. Many former NBA players and analysts felt that joining 3 All-Stars to win a championship is a bad move on many different levels. In retrospect, 4 years after, whatever you may think about it, Kevin Durant made the right choice. The Golden State Warriors needed him to win more championships and likely wouldn't get past Cleveland in 2017 and Houston in 2018 without KD. Bill Lambie. Fouls after the ref's whistle. Tripping, punching, elbowing, setting illegal screens, and always playing on the edge of an incident. All of these were tactics of the Detroit Pistons from the late 80s, with Bill Lambie as their spiritual leader. Lambie is one of the most universally hated players in NBA history due to his physical play that borderlines a wrestling match. Larry Bird said that he didn't hate anybody in the NBA other than Bill Lambie, and he called him a dirty player. When Robert Parrish, who was usually very calm and collected, took a swing at Lambie in the 1986 playoffs, the whole arena cheered him on. Bill was one of the biggest provocateurs that ever played in the NBA. Flopping was his middle name, and he would often start a fight and then act like he's in tremendous pain in front of a ref when somebody hit him back. Even though he was a pretty good player, a center who could shoot threes 30 years before it was cool, and a 4-time All-Star, Lambie's highlight reel is often filled with his non-basketball plays. Lambie doesn't care. He did what he thought he had to do, and he was a crucial part of 2 championship teams. Nobody can say that he's soft, and even though they hate him everywhere else, he'll forever be loved in Detroit. Isaiah Thomas. Lambie was the enforcer for the Pistons, and Isaiah was the brain and heart of the team. While Lambie was Luca Brasi, Isaiah was Vito Corleone, and the team was running on his beat, both in basketball and in non-basketball plays. You'd never think anyone could hate this 6'1" player with an infectious smile, but there was something about Isaiah that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Jordan hates Isaiah even today, mostly because the Pistons refused to shake hands with the Bulls at the end of their conference finals in 1991. Scottie Pippen shares the same emotions towards Isaiah, and so do Charles Oakley and Karl Malone, who tried to decapitate him in December of 1991, after which Isaiah needed 40 stitches to repair the damage to his face. Magic Johnson and Isaiah were best friends in the 80s. But since the early 90s, they weren't on speaking terms, and their beef lasted for more than 2 decades. Isaiah collected enemies even after his playing days. He did a terrible job as a GM of the Knicks, which led to years of misery for New York fans, which could be the only fan base that hates Thomas more than they hate him in Boston. Isaiah was definitely a great champion, and one of the best point guards who ever played. He would do whatever it took to win, legal or illegal, which unfortunately didn't win him a lot of popularity points. Ron Artest. Ron Artest, Meta World Peace, or Panda's friend, however you want to call him, was one of the most physical NBA players ever, both in a good and not so good way. In 2004, Artest became the Defensive Player of the Year, and he shined on the Pacers with his gritty approach to the game. In 2005, he received the biggest suspension ever handed by the NBA for his involvement at the infamous Malice at the Palace, when he fought with several fans deep in the stands. In 2012, he nearly took James Harden's head off his shoulders with an elbow shot worthy of an MMA highlight. Aside from these notable fights, Artest had various other on-court scuffles and arguments with opposing players and referees throughout his career. He's now called Meta Sandiford Artest, and is a much more lovable and chill dude who realized he made mistakes during his playing days. Quiet Storm, the Ron Artest story, is a documentary about his life, which premiered last year, and we recommend watching it, especially if you want to get a more in-depth look at what happened at Malice at the Palace. Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett is one of the best power forwards who ever played basketball, and is probably the most intense man that ever played it. Even though everybody respected him for his love of the sport and the intensity he brought to every practice and every game, he wasn't liked around the league all that much. Garnett was known for his foul mouth, and his no-limit trash talk made him hated by many players and fans. He often crossed the line with his statements, insulting Carmelo Anthony's wife, calling Charlie Villanueva a cancer patient, trash-talking Tim Duncan on Mother's Day because he knew his mother had died, were just some of the most famous ones. KG was especially rude to rookies, who were his most frequent prey. Joakim Noah said that he was the biggest Garnett fan, and when they played for the first time, he approached Garnett and told him he was his idol. Garnett's response was plain and simple. He told Noah to F off, which gives you a pretty good description of who KG was between the lines. Kobe Bryant. Kobe is one of the most universally loved and respected players in basketball history, if not the most. He'll forever be missed, and we truly lost a great man with an unbreakable spirit. However, during his playing days, Kobe was hated and booed in almost every NBA arena outside of LA. Because he tormented their teams over the years, opposing crowds loved to hate on Kobe. And at one point, especially during the mid-2000s, Bryant was considered as the #1 NBA villain. The fans disliked that Kobe played hero ball all the time, and that he didn't pass the ball to his teammates. They blamed him for Shaq leaving LA, for his brash antics on the court, and his highly publicized court case didn't endear him to anybody either. Then there were teammates like Smush Parker, who criticized Kobe for being too cruel, and opposing players who thought Kobe was dirty, because he would do every trick in the book to gain an advantage, and it was a nightmare to guard him. Kobe was also very distant at times, but that all changed near the end of his career, where he opened up more and let everybody know that he was actually a kind and loving guy. It's just that his competitiveness didn't allow him to show it more. Draymond Green. Draymond Green is one of my favorite NBA players, even though he can be annoying as hell at times. He often acts like he never made a foul in his life, and I'm not a fan of him constantly talking to the refs during games. Other than that, I think what Draymond does for his team is fantastic, and I like players who stir controversy in this new lukewarm era of NBA beefs. Draymond plays basketball with a lot of emotion, and he's one of the most intelligent players we have in the NBA today. He's also extremely competitive, and he's not afraid to push people's buttons and says everything that's on his mind. Of course, that doesn't sit well with everybody, and many NBA fans and opposing players think Draymond talks too much, and that's why he's one of the most polarizing players in the league today. Dwight Howard. Just like LeBron and KD, Dwight Howard was universally loved at the beginning of his NBA journey, which completely changed in recent years, as Dwight managed to piss off the players and fan bases of almost every team he played for. It all started well in Orlando, where Dwight was drafted #1 overall in 2004. Howard became the best center in the league. His dunks were the main attraction at the All-Star games, and he was the best player on a team that nearly won the title in 2009. After that, it all went downhill. First, he got Stan Van Gundy fired in Orlando and forced to trade to LA. After a disappointing season and constant fights with his teammates, especially Kobe, Dwight fled to Houston. There he had a feud with James Harden, and it was a trend that continued everywhere he went. After he was 1 foot out of the league, Dwight realized he needs to change his behavior and approach to the game, and has thankfully resurrected his career with the Lakers and gained the respect he lost around the league. Latrell Sprewell. Spree is one of the most entertaining NBA players ever, both on and off the court, and both positively and negatively. He started his career as one of the premier wing players in the 90s, and had made the All-Star team 4 times. Then the troubles began, and he began fighting in games and practices. His most famous incident stemmed from the 1997 season, when he choked out his coach PJ Carlesimo, after which he was always looked at sideways from NBA fans and some of his peers. His legendary rejection of the $21 million contract, with the explanation that it's not enough money and that he has to feed his children, hasn't won him many fans, and he never played in the league after that. Some other notable highly hated players include Reggie Miller, who loved being the villain in every arena, Vince Carter in the era of his gruesome departure from Toronto, and Christian Laettner because it was Christian Laettner, and everybody hated him since his days at Duke.